Hey buddy, it's time to talk about the most essential topic in Java, probably not only Java, but also in other programming languages. It's about operators. So Java operators fall into several categories. Let's break them down with examples. First, the arithmetic operators, which is basically addition, subtraction, multiplication, dividing, calculating of modulo, plus, which increases by 1 or minus. Next, the assignment operators, like you have already seen from previous videos. You are only using one equal sign to initialize a variable, or plus equals increases the number by 1, or minus equals, asterisk equals, or divide equals, and so on. So we will do some examples in the next steps, but let's go ahead with the categories. Next, the comparison operators, which are basically comparing two objects or two values to each other. First, the equal sign, the is not equal, the bigger than or less than, or bigger equal or less equal, and so on. Next, the logic operators. So we are logically chain values, most likely, or not most likely, mostly Boolean values, which are Boolean values of values true or false. So you can then use the logical operators, but we will do examples as I said before. Next, bitwise, the shift operators or the ternary operator. But in the focus of this video, we will not cover these last two because these are more likely used in the future or in the advanced Java topics, so we will not cover those. So let me delete these. So let me do some arithmetic operator examples right here. Let's say we want to initialize a value called int x value and say it's 10, and system print out line, as you know from previous examples, if we execute that, the value is of course 10. But that's not what we want to show you right here. We want to use one of those arithmetic operations here, right? So we say 10 plus 5, and if we execute that, the example will not be 10 plus 5 as you did it here. The example or the result is basically calculated together. So it's 15. So let's do another example and say integer example value and call it x multiplied with the value 2. And if we want to print that value, at first the x value does not exist at all, so we have to call it x value from above here, right? And if we execute that, the result will be 30, since 15 multiplied with 2 is 30. We could also say integer example value 2 and call it example value modulo and call modulo 3. Let's system print outline this as before so that you see the example result, and it's 0. Why? Because 13 modulo 3 is 0. So if we divide 30 with 3, and the last division will not give you any rest, right? So that's why the result is 0. Let's do another example and say int x value 2 and call it x value with a prefix of minus. And if you print that, you will see that the result is 14, because 15 minus means decrease it by once, results to 14. We now show you some assignment operators examples. Let me just delete every example we showed you about arithmetic operators and begin with integer a value equals to 10. We can then say, okay, a plus equals and say 10, and then go ahead a not plus but multiply by equals 2. And if we say always in between, so that you can trace what is done here or what the examples result to, let me put always a system out print line in between, execute that. You see the result is in the beginning first 10, because we initialized the a value with 10. That's what you have learned so far. But in the next step, we are adding to the variable a, or we do it with the symbols plus equals 10, which results to 20 right here. In the next line, we are multiplying that number, which is 20, by 2, and this results to 40, right? So let's jump to the comparison operators. Let me delete also these examples to assignment operators and begin by system out nano out print line and say 5 equals or not equals is greater than 3. So we are starting by the first number and asking the relation to the second number. So that's why I said 5 is greater, right? Greater right here is greater than 3. So if we execute that, the result will be true, right? Because 5 is obviously greater than 3. What we can do also here is that we say x equals to 5 and say x epsilon equals to 3. We could also put the variables right here and compare them. And still the result is true because 5 is greater than 3. What we can do is also that we change that comparison operator, not greater, but less to epsilon. And if we execute that, the result will be obviously false because it is not less than epsilon since x is 5 and epsilon is 3. So we can also make other comparisons like system out print line 5 equals to 5, or another one 5 is not equal to 10. And if we execute that, the second operation results to a true value because 5 is equal to 5, right? And also the last operation, 5 is not 10, must be true as well, because obviously if you can calculate or if you know the numbers, 5 is not 10, right? So that's currently what's happening here. So if we play the game further, we come along to logical operators we will cover with the comparison operators. So let's say we don't want to print this logic, what we have done here. We want to assign the result to any Boolean values because we are talking about Boolean values when we compare. So let's do something as I already spoiled, call it Boolean value result equals, and let's put everything into parentheses since we want to have one summarized or cumulative result here. So if we say x is less than 10, and now we use logical operators, and x is greater than, now let's say 4, and if we system print outline the result, what do you think will happen? So let's execute that, and the result will be true as well, right? Because x right here is 5, and x is less than 10, but greater than 4, since these both operations are true, the result is true right here, right? And so if we say x is not greater than 4 and say x is greater than 6, which is not because it's 5 right here, the result will be end up to false because both checks need to be true so that the value is true here right as well. So what we can also do is we put the OR operations right here. So OR means either one of those operations or these checks must fit so that the output or the result is true here. So if we execute that, our value or the result gets turned true. So I guess you understand that here. What we can say is also we put is not in the beginning of the brackets, and if we execute that, voila, the result gets to false because we said the result inside here must be false. And since the result gets true because of that value, but not the second OR operation, and since this is true, which does not fit to the negated operation, it gets to a false. So to get that false, we have to get a result of false of these comparison operators or the logical operations inside here. So to do that, the first comparison we have to get to a false value. So let's do it by saying x is less than 4. So this gets false, and also this one gets false. So the summarized result ends up to a false. And if the summarized result ends up to a false, and if we negate that, the result must be true right here. So if we execute it, voila, the result does end to an true value. So I hope you got the idea. If not, let me know in the comments. I will try to explain it more in deep. If you like the tutorial, hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment. I really appreciate that. Stay healthy. Thank you and goodbye.